Hello and welcome to Narrowcast Boxing. It's June 2nd, 2019. In this episode, I'll be discussing several fights from yesterday's Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz Jr. card. But before I begin, I'd like to mention that I will be taking this upcoming week off. There won't be any previews because there aren't really any noteworthy fights, so I'll be back in a little over a week. With that said, I'd like to start this podcast by discussing Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz Jr. This fight ended with a 7th round TKO victory for Andy Ruiz Jr. I called this fight wrong. I did not see a path to victory for Andy Ruiz, and he shocked me and I'm sure a lot of other people. Let me say congratulations to the new unified heavyweight champion. Ruiz weighed in for this fight at 268 pounds, which really didn't give me much confidence. He looked really physically poor in the fight in terms of his condition, but looks were greatly deceiving. It was a tentative opening from both guys, just boxing and really trying to establish themselves. In the third round there was an exchange and Ruiz was caught with a heavy left hook and he went down. He didn't seem too badly hurt by the punch and remained calm. Joshua looked to close the show, and it really cost him. He came in throwing punches, and Ruiz countered him with a shot to the temple, and followed up, which had Joshua on the canvas for the first time. Joshua got back up. Ruiz patiently applied pressure and had him down for a second time in the round. By this point, I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was absolutely shocked. Round 4, they were both clearly cautious and I think a little bit fatigued. Each of them had been down in the previous round, and I couldn't help but feel that if Ruiz weighed in at something like 250 or less, that his gas tank would be better and he could finish what he started in the previous round. I felt he really needed to put it on Joshua in the fourth, and I felt like the longer the fight went, the better off Anthony Joshua would be. Ruiz was outboxing Joshua in the 5th and 6th round, although these were fairly close. Joshua wasn't doing too much, and he was, like I said, getting outboxed in my opinion. Ruiz hit Joshua with some nice body shots, which visibly hurt him, and Joshua by this point was really starting to look awful. In the 7th round, Ruiz really applied pressure with his fast hands and knocked Joshua down for the 3rd and 4th time in the fight. After the 4th knockdown, Joshua spit his mouthpiece out and turned his back to the referee, trying to get more time. Joshua's body language was one of defeat at this point, and the referee waved it off. I think it was a fair enough stoppage. This was really a brilliant performance from Andy Ruiz. I doubted him. I thought he'd make it an interesting fight with Joshua eventually getting to him, but Ruiz really turned the tables on him. This was a huge upset, and probably the biggest one since I've started watching boxing. I imagine that a rematch will take place. I think that the rematch will be a true 50-50 fight. I think that Joshua has the ability to knock Andy Ruiz out. However, I could see Joshua getting taken out once again. My thought has always been that if you beat a fighter once, you can beat him twice. It will definitely be interesting to see what happens. Moving on to the undercard and co-main event, we had Callum Smith versus Hassan Endam. This was a 3rd round stoppage win for Callum Smith. He knocked Endam down once in each round and finished the fight with a counter right hand. The fight was a joke, basically, as expected. Callum Smith looked like he had about 25 pounds on Endam and several inches in height and reach. This was such a mismatch and really disgraceful matchmaking. Nothing more to really say. Katie Taylor versus Delphine Persoon. I had this fight a draw, 95-95. The judges had it 95-95 and 96-94 times 2. This was a majority decision win for Katie Taylor, which I thought was fair enough. This was a messy fight with a lot of smothering and clinches, and overall it was a pretty brutal fight as well with a lot of cuts. I thought Taylor was doing the cleaner work earlier on, with Pursoon marauding forward and trying to make it ugly. Both fighters really lacked a jab throughout the fight. This started off as a bad fight, in my opinion, but it definitely got better later on. Pursoon really came on strong in the last few rounds and made it close. In my preview last week, I said that I thought this would be a good fight, and it turned out to be one later on. Not really much more to say about this one, though. Josh Kelly versus Ray Robinson. I scored the fight 96 to 94 for Josh Kelly. Judges had it 96 to 95, one of them for Kelly, and 95 to 95 times 2. So the official decision was a draw, which I felt was fair once again. From early on, it was clear that Kelly had an advantage in hand and foot speed, but spent a lot of the fight really doing nothing, looking flashy for the sake of looking flashy, just not really throwing punches for long stretches of the fight, giving 5 or 10 feints just to throw one lunging uppercut that missed the mark. Overall, Kelly was basically just pot-shotting, landing the more eye-catching punches with Robinson doing more work, which made this a tough fight to score. I have no problem with the draw. I think it was a fine outcome. I know Kelly was being built as a talented prospect, but I just don't see it with him. I was skeptical before the fight, and I'm more so afterwards. I just don't think he has a world-level style, and I could see him getting beat with speed and power, and by somebody who fights conventionally. The final fight of the night, which I'll cover, is Joshua Buatsi versus Marco Antonio Paraban. Buatsi wins by stoppage in the 4th round. The stoppage was maybe a little bit too early, but Paraban didn't really complain. He had been dropped earlier in the round. He wasn't that hurt, it didn't seem like, but he was getting hit a lot. Buatsi is clearly, in my opinion, a good fighter, and this performance from him was impressive. I was skeptical about Paraban coming into the fight, but he was tough, and I think he allowed Buatsi to really shine. In my opinion, Buatsi is probably the best British prospect at the moment. I like everything I'm seeing from him, and he's definitely a fighter to watch out for moving forward. Anyway, that's all I have in this episode. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I will talk to you probably in a week or so. I'll see you then.